Michigan, a Democrat-led committee has recently approved a $175 million bid to build an electric vehicle battery plant. If we look at Texas, 30% of the energy production is now through renewables. But both states are encountering significant pushback to that.
Well, that's right, Brendon. Americans aren't against clean water and Americans aren't against clean air. There's another problem here. The problem is with the climate agenda itself and the fanatics in the United States who've been pushing it around the world, and of course, the global power that stands to most gain from it. Let's take a look at the details.
I'm Brendan Fallon.
And I'm Lee Smith.
And we're over the target. In Austin, you have a number of Republican lawmakers pushing a slate of bills that would remove the kind of concessions and incentives that have been there to encourage the use of renewable energy. And at the same time, you also have locals, like many farmers, who are adamantly against having their land used for this purpose, like for the use of solar panels and things like that.
I think that's a very good point. Whether it's ranchers, whether it's other kinds of farmers in Texas, to have all this land used for setting up wind turbines or for solar panels, it's using up important land on which you can grow things that feed the population. And so that's one problem. Also it's an eyesore. Remember that. The way that these wind turbines look on the I guess we call them a skyline now, almost like a city, except they're a blight. The other problem is we have to remember Texas got into a lot of trouble back in 2021. I believe it was February, when the lights went out across Texas. And why was that? Because the wind turbines froze. Apparently, no one ever told Texas officials or the people responsible for Texas's power grid that was certainly a possibility, that overdependence on renewable energies, especially with wind turbine, that kind of thing might happen. Clearly, what we're seeing here is what's supposed to happen in the United States. The citizenry gets upset, they get angry, and officials have no choice but to respond to it. If they don't, they're out of a job. So we're seeing the system work the way it's supposed to here. And it's good for Republicans and Democrats to have this argument. This is how it's supposed to go.
And we have a similar situation in Michigan where people are also angry. We had locals object to this proposal to put $175 million into building an electric vehicle plant that would be used by the Chinese company Gotion. Despite the fervent opposition from locals, this was passed by the Democratic-led committee.
Yeah, we're seeing conflict. We're seeing drama here, right? We have large parts of the country that are against the climate agenda, and we see other parts that are trying to push it. The Democrats and the state legislature in Michigan are clearly trying to push it. You can understand why it's important for certain politicians to push these ideas, because they'll say, well, look, we're bringing jobs to the state. Isn't that a good thing? And the response that people have to that, the people who are protesting against, are saying, yeah, of course we want jobs. We want our state to be prosperous. But here's what we don't want. We're very concerned about what the Chinese Communist Party was doing here in our state. We don't want them buying our land. We've seen them buying up land all over the country. We don't want them buying up land here because we think that's dangerous. Also, we don't want to start putting money in their pockets. We're not a slave population. Why are we working for the Chinese Communist Party? So while jobs are good, the character and nature of those jobs are raising lots of questions for people around the country. And again, that's exactly what we want. This is the way political debates are supposed to happen, rather than just having agenda imposed on Americans.
Getting back to Texas, Lee, going back about 13 years when then Governor Rick Perry was touting the idea of diversifying the state's electricity provision, he compared it to the sparking of Texas's petroleum industry going back to the early 1900s. So it looked like this was going to be the dawn of something really amazing and something that was going to be highly beneficial to Texas. Why does Texas find itself in the situation that it's in now?
Well, as we said, Texas has seen serious problems with its power grid very recently. And look, the other thing, when a Texas lawmaker, when a Texas official starts comparing it to just like the big Texas oil boom, he's trying to get a whole bunch of people on his side. And even if his comparison is not exactly accurate, and he's spreading a lot of horse manure around those oil fields. Look, oil is a very different thing than what's happening with the climate change infrastructure.
What is the issue with the climate change agenda? I mean, the average person doesn't want the environment polluted. We all want a clean environment for ourselves, for our children, our grandchildren. So what is the tension here?
This isn't your standard American environmentalist movement or the conservationist movement. Let's remember that conservationism has a very, very old history in the United States. It's part of the fabric of the country, and it totally makes sense when you think about it, right? This is a beautiful and bounteous country, and people wanted to protect it. And foremost among them are, of course, farmers who rely on the land. So the idea that somehow farmers are predators is preposterous, because that's how they make their living, from the land. That's part of their family inheritance, the land. But speaking about the conservationist movement, let's just think about the real highlight of that as President Teddy Roosevelt and the national parks. This really sort of institutionalized the American conservationist movement, how important nature was, how much this meant to Americans, how much this was a part of our country, that we needed to protect wild animals as well. So the conservationist movement is not just about land and air, it's also about animals, right? This is a very important thing. Everything from bears, Smokey the Bear, how to take care of animals, preserve our wildlife. Look at all the great writers on American conservationism, from Aldo Leopold to Wendell Berry. It's a very, very central thing to our identity as Americans. As you said, Brendon, there are no Americans who are arguing for dirty water or dirty air. What's happened, though, is they've recognized that with the climate change agenda, there's something very different going on here. It's not about conservationism. It's not about environmentalism.
I think there are a number of jarring contradictions in terms of the climate agenda. For one, the fact that we may be reducing the amount of fossil fuel-based production, manufacturing that happens in the US, but often it's being offshored to somewhere like China, where they're relying on fossil fuels, and they're doing it in a much dirtier way than it would actually be done in the US. There's actually more pollution being generated.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not hard to do the math. When the Chinese are building, what is it, 6 new coal plants a week, something like that, and at the end it's more than the rest of the world combined. So, I mean, anyone can do the math. You don't have to be Einstein to put it together and figure out what's happening. We keep paying the Chinese Communist Party for climate change infrastructure, and what are they doing with that money? They are buying more oil from the Saudis, and they're building coal plants. So how is this helping the environment? When you really get to the bottom of it, you look and you see this isn't actually about the environment at all. When we talk about emissions, when we talk about who's being saved and who's being helped, it's not animals and it's not mankind either. When you look at the wind farms, when you look at the solar farms and the different ecosystems that destroys, how is this helping God's creatures on planet Earth? As it turns out, it's not even designed to help mankind. If you like the abridged version, you got to see the whole show where we really light it up, but exclusively on Epoch TV, where you'll find not only Over the Target, but all your favorite Epoch TV shows. Watch us there, the full show.
Catch Lee and I on Epoch TV and leave your comments. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you know.